Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by John Hoye, the athletic director at the John Cooper School in the Woodlands, Texas, which is a little bit north of Houston, maybe west. I don't remember. He'll clear that up for me. He's also the president of the Southwest Preparatory Conference, which is the independent school league in Texas. Coach, thanks for being on today. Been looking forward to this.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, here we go. Take us through your background as a coach, as an athletic director. How did you end up in this business? Where'd you go to school, high school, college, athletics, all of that, so that we get to where we are now?
Gotcha. Yeah. So grew up in Wisconsin, believe it or not, and was always involved in athletics in high school. Did basketball, volleyball, cross country, track. I always tagged along with my older brother. Always interested, enjoyed it. And when I went off to university, I eventually made my way to LSU. And while I was down in Baton Rouge, I was actually playing basketball at the rec one day. My college roommate ran track and we were playing basketball, and there's a group of high school students that I didn't know. He knew them because he was a couple years older, but they're at the same high school. And I had always been interested in coaching, and he knew it. And we were talking with these guys, and one of the fathers actually was one of the first African Americans to play basketball at LSU. And so he was picking them up, and we're talking. I said, I always wanted to get into coaching and didn't think too much of it. And he said, why don't you come by and come start working with the high school? And I was like, okay. And I think I was 20 at the time. And just by chance made my way into coaching high school at the age of 20, assistant on the varsity team, volunteering, figuring stuff out, making a lot of mistakes. I ended up doing that for 2 years, my last 2 years at LSU. And while I was there, caught the bug of wanting to get into college coaching. I originally was an engineering major, but switched to education because I thought it'd be more relevant to get into high school, college, long term. At the time, I met my wife, or fiance, or girlfriend at the time, and her family lawyer was friends with and played high school or played college basketball with the head coach at Rice University. And eventually, after my second year coaching, I went and worked all summer camp. And at the end of summer in Houston, they had a position opening for the low man on the coaching ranks. But I was 22 years old, excited. Position came open and interviewed and got into college coaching at 22. It was funny because there's two guys on the team that were older than me at the time. Yeah, so ended up coaching at Rice University for 3 years. And my wife and I looked at, do we want to do the bounce around from college to college? And I had an opportunity to move up in the college ranking, but it was in a small town. My wife was teaching. She wasn't too keen on that. And so we made the decision to transition from college into high school athletics. And there was an opening at a school called the Audi International School, really cool school in Houston, and ended up interviewing there, getting a job there, and was an assistant basketball coach, coached volleyball, cross country, track, you name it. I was involved in it, as many of the independent school coaches and teachers do. But yeah, I did that I was there for 15 years. I was a grade level coordinator for a year, moved up to the head basketball coach, learned a lot about cross country, that I was a lot slower than the kids are nowadays, but eventually moved into the athletic director position, served there for 4 years. And then an opportunity came at the John Cooper School, came open, and transitioned there, and have been there for 10 years now.
All right, love all that background. So from Wisconsin to LSU, talk me through that. That's not really something that when you're, let's call it the Midwestern, Northern Midwest,
Yeah.
where you're thinking about leaving the snow for the heat of the Gulf.
Yeah, and so that's a story in itself. So my dad's an accountant, right? And so he counts the money, counts everything. And he had this rule where you had to go to college within 4 hours of where you grew up. And I grew up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. So you can get to Kalamazoo, Michigan. You can get to the middle of Illinois. You can get to northern Iowa. You can get to Minneapolis and everywhere in between. And I was looking at where I wanted to go. My brother was up in Green Bay at a school called St. Norbert's. And so I was like, I don't want to go there. I want to go somewhere else. Chose a school called University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, which is 2 hours east of Minneapolis. There's not a lot up there. And it's
Beautiful to
on.
drive through, though. I did it 2 summers ago, and it was probably one of the most calming drives ever
Oh
from
yeah,
Green Bay to Minneapolis.
yeah, yeah. And it's on the Chippewa River, which is one of the 10 coldest places in the continental United States. And now I grew up in Milwaukee. We had snowball fights, like King of the Mountain. I had a paper route. Being outside for 3 hours when it was cold was nothing to us. And so the first day of second semester, it's about a half-mile walk from the dorm to the college. And you're geared up. It was cold. I was geared up. Sweater, jacket, scarf, hat, gloves, sunglasses, everything. And as I made it from the dorm, walking on the chip next to the Chippewa River to the class, I got into the building and my eyelashes had frozen together. Again, I grew up, I'd never experienced, I was confused. It was like one of those things, I didn't know what was going on. So all the vapor from breathing had collected there. You squint because the snow. And so I finally figured it out and I said, this isn't normal. Now, my brother, a year older, was about to go on international exchange. And so I said to myself, he's going to Bolivia for international exchange. Certainly, I can go on national exchange. Found the found the Office of National Exchange. And my choice, not lying, UC Santa Barbara, Arizona State, LSU, Miami. I mean, there was a clear difference. LSU responded first, ended up going down there, spent the year. At the end of the year, I applied for out-of-state tuition waiver. Called my dad. I'm like, Dad, here's the deal. I said, you can come back down and help me move everything back up, or I can stay down here and it's $3,000 less to officially transfer to LSU. He said transfer. And that accountant came out in him. So he saw the numbers. And so that's how I guess I worked my way to LSU from northern Wisconsin.
Oh, I love that story. One small world. My swim coach works in our admissions office. Actually, was the head coach of St. Norbert's swim team for a
Oh,
while. So it's fascinating where these things cross-pollinate a little bit. All right, so that was the one piece I wanted to know. And then you moved to Rice, which is in Houston, obviously, because of the connect to the family. And
yes.
that then relocated you to Houston to start, and you've been there ever since, essentially.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, got that. All right, so let's go back, if you can remember this far ago, as a college assistant, and I'm assuming it's either like the GA or back in the day, the restricted earnings
Yep.
job.
That's what it was.
Yep, where it's like, all right, let me get into this. I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground, but what did I need to figure out right away when you took that job? Talk me through some of those things because the genesis of this entire show was to help independent schools like us, our faculty who get told they have to coach, to have a digital database of mentorship because some of them might not have the same background that we do. Would love to know as you stepped into that assistant job, kind of, okay, yeah, I needed to figure this out because I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. So, and it was, I really didn't know anything. I knew basketball, but at that level, the amount of basketball stuff that you're doing is very minimal, especially fell into a good spot. And I still have good relationships with the team that we had. Todd Smith, he's the AD at University of St. Thomas, right downtown here in Houston. And Willis Wilson, I'm still in touch with him. He's one of the administrators at Rice University. And John Herndon, he's a coach up actually at Austin Regents right now. So I'm still in touch with our core group, but they taught me everything because I didn't know, just not growing up playing college basketball is very different. The connections that you have. And as we, I guess at that time was right at the beginning of the transition from VHS to digital. And so I remember we had this company that was called Vizio, I think it was called, and they're from Australia. And we were one of the first universities to have some digital breakdown of film. And it was really cool. The only thing is we were so far advanced, no one else could utilize it all the time. We would use it internally. But what it forced me to do, because I had the luxury of breaking down a lot of those things, I learned everything about our basketball program, X's and O's. So it was a crash course for me, inbound plays, out of bound plays, techniques. So it was, again, really useful. And that X's and O's was a really great learning part. The other thing that I was doing was trying to do, this is before athletic departments at the university level had a robust staff. So it's coming up with monthly newsletters. We had one called Hoop Scoop. Every month I had to write a newsletter, 8 pages long, and get it out to the alumni and setting up chalk talks and just figuring out how the gear is, the travel, all those kind of things that make the games possible was probably the big thing that I was learning at the time.
That makes sense. I still remember when I was in the college game for a few years, I had the little small closet next to the office that
Yeah.
had the VCRs and
Yep.
tape decks, and I'm dubbing it myself. And
That's it. That's it.
yep,
One
envelopes,
time,
sending them out, film exchange, all of that.
one
Different
time
world.
we were, and so we were in the Western Athletic Conference,
Yep.
and at the time, our travel partner was Tulsa. So Rice and Tulsa would travel, and we had a trip out to the West Coast, and I think it was Fresno and UNLV that we're
Hmm.
going to, or Fresno and Reno. And so at that point, again, before digital exchange, you'd meet the teams halfway and exchange film. That's how,
Yep.
you did it. And so the week before, we accidentally didn't send, or we sent a video, but it was all messed up. And they
Yeah.
were, so they were mad because they didn't have anything to review. Man, we got halfway there. Hey, great to see you. Exchange film. We get to the hotel, nothing on the tape.
They gave it
And
back
you
to
can
you.
do nothing about it. Nothing. And it's one of those things that
Oh,
just happens, but
so good.
it's one of those things you learn a lot. You learn a lot and figure out a whole lot of things that are still useful.
Oh man, yeah. Let me put a pin in this, but I was the advanced. So we had a similar travel partner deal. So Cal State Chico and Humboldt State were partners, and from Davis, where I was at, one was 2.5 hours away, one was 6. And I'd be up in Humboldt the night before watching that, and then coming
Yep.
back down, and it was just like the era of digital video has solved a lot of those
Oh
problems
yeah.
for us.
Oh
So
yeah.
love that. Okay, going from college now to high school, similarly. Do I want to bounce around forever? Do I want to plant some roots? Similar story that I had. Talk about that transition from college athletics, but also into not just high school athletics, but teaching, because that's like your primary job and athletics
Mhm.
is your hobby. So
Yeah.
that transition, as that happened, what were some of the things that still stand out to you 20 years later? And what were
Yeah.
some of the things that like were tough to deal with, but also a breath of fresh air, so to speak?
And I touched about it a little bit earlier. My wife and I talked about, do we want to bounce around or end up in all kinds of small towns? And we didn't. And she was from Houston. I really enjoyed Houston. Luckily, I did have an education degree, and I grew up in private schools, K through 12. So I was used to that environment. And so when the opportunity came up at Audi International, is a different kind of school. It's a truly international school. And it's, it was at that time about 35% of the population were French citizens. They had a French curriculum. I speak no French at all. And it was a learning curve from a cultural one, but then you're teaching first grade, second grade, middle school, upper school. And I knew my experience doing summer camps. We ran camps all the time. And obviously, it is different when you're just concentrating on basketball, but the organization of a camp station and a team for a week has a lot of crossover and similarities to how you're running your PE class, getting your organization set early so that you can do things, learning the kids, learning their strengths and weaknesses. I felt that I've always been good with students and connecting and having that fine line between discipline and respect, but then also having a good time, because I think that's a big part of it. When you're in physical education, it's a different type of classroom where you're challenging the kids in a different way. And so there was a definite learning curve, but I think that the flexibility in independent schools really was a benefit versus some of I guess, the concrete things that need to take place when you're in the public school system.
For sure. And I would say unique as well that you're K through 12, right? And your current school is the same deal.
Correct.
What's that like in regards to the fluidity between that? Like our K through 8 is at a different campus than our high school. I still
Mhm.
oversee it all, but I also have a colleague who runs the middle school program. But what's that like in both of those schools for you? And how did you integrate all of that together, both as a coach and once you moved into athletic administration? What were some of the challenges you faced there?
Yeah, one of the biggest benefits is probably pretty obvious. You get to see and know the kids from early age all the way up. Our school right now, year after year, I'd say 95, 98% of the students remain. So there's not a lot of change. It's as stable as a school as you can find. And from an athletic standpoint, you have the continuity. If you're teaching sixth grade to seventh grade to eighth grade volleyball, and then they transition into high school, you have the opportunity to be teaching the same things, the same language, the same drills, obviously at a higher level, but you have that familiarity that will hopefully allow for more success. Now, from a cultural standpoint, the community strength is unreal. I have a fifth grader that's at the school, and he knows kids all the way up to upper school, and that's not uncommon. You have brothers and sisters of siblings in different grades, and they're watching games, and parents have different kinds of relationships because you may know someone from fifth grade, from third grade, all the way on, and your classmates become friends, but then parents become friends. And so when we have community events, it's the bond is incredible.
And going from your original school to your current school, what was
Mhm.
that shift like, both in learning a new culture? What transitioned? What didn't? What did you have to put down? What did you have to start doing differently? What did you realize? Yeah, I've done this job for 4 years, but now I'm moving schools and it's not the same.
One of the big things, and I know when I'm in Texas, is the addition of football, right? So international school, their main sport is soccer, and you transition in many, if not all schools in Texas, football is pretty prominent. And an LSU guy, we like college football a little bit. So I was really excited about that. And the success of all the sports, it's not just from football, but one transitions to another very well. In an international school, you have some of the sports that are more of the Olympic style. That might be swimming and cross country and golf, and we're really strong in all those. We just won a state championship in cross country this year, won golf last year. But the step up in the league and the different teams that were playing really it was attractive to me.
So I'm going to ask this question, and I don't want to say it's a validation question, but I think it to be true here is that football rules everything. It is treated differently than all of the other sports. People want to have equity, they want to have balance, they want to have all these other things, but football is the tail that wags the dog. In most colleges, in most high schools, it just is what it is. And so, in regards to that, let's call it generalization. How would you say that having football even as an option, right, at your current school compared to your old school, how do you think that influences your student demographic and student population? Because I've made the comment that we play 11-man football, right? I don't want to say it's a stretch, but it's a challenge every year to make sure that we can field two teams, that we can continue to build, that we can continue to plant seeds with 250 boys essentially. You need 20% of them playing football to have 50 between your two teams. You're in a similar boat. But it's like, how does that impact who's coming to the school and who's not? Because ultimately in Texas, especially, like football matters.
One thing with a lot of our football players, I'd say the percentage is higher than some of our other sports, is that they're multi-sport athletes. A lot of our football players end up playing baseball, track, and actually we've had a good run of basketball players that also want to play football. And so I think that's something that's often forgotten because at independent schools, we have the ability to have students play multiple sports. A lot of times it's unfortunate, but the way it is at a lot of larger public schools is so many students specialize, even as freshmen and sophomores. And we depend on multi-sport athletes. And without those, we wouldn't be successful in any sport. It's just because it's a numbers game that you were speaking of, but it's something that we promote. If it's football players that have always wanted to play another sport, but couldn't because the public school or the other school said, no, you need to do this, and this is your off-season lifting program, and this is what you're doing in the spring. We encourage the kids to play multiple sports. And I think that's a big benefit that people forget about.
Yeah, so talk to me about how you're pushing back against the youth sports industrial complex, as I call it, that would have these kids
Yeah.
and parents believe that they're missing out by doing that. And as you mentioned it, schools like ours, we
Mhm.
need all of our best athletes to play everything. And I can tell you, we are the outlier in modern society that we have as many multi-sport kids as we do. So, how are you continuing to hold on to that dream and that need when everything else in society is trying to tear them away from that?
Yeah, and this is an interesting time right now because when you and I were playing AU and whatever summer league, it was temporary. It wasn't all encompassing. And high schools is where the majority of college recruiting took place, and AU and summer ball and all that was supplemental. And I think it's switched, right? It has switched now where you look at soccer, you look at volleyball, select baseball, select softball. That's where a lot of the college recruiting takes place. And it's a financial thing because besides probably men's and women's basketball, those sports don't have the budgets to go out to 20 different events a year. So they have these huge events that clubs sponsor, and that's where they get the recruiting done. And so we look at what we're doing as, for lack of better terms, a supplement to the club for the higher level players. And the question is, if you're a high school student, why would you even want to play high school sports if the recruiting is going on at the club level? And what we know and what we see, and you see it too, is there's one thing if you are at a club volleyball tournament and you get a kill in an upset win and your team is excited and the parents are excited. And then you go into your car and you're maybe with a friend and you're by yourself. But there's something different about having the stands packed and your teammates, your classmates cheering for you and seeing you the next day and said, "Hey, I saw you play last night." And those types of relationships that you're the point guard and you are in class together and you see each other all the time. There's something that experience goes a long way that people forget about. And we talk to our students about it. We know that if you're playing tennis at a higher level, that you're going to be going all around the country and working on UTR and all that. But playing for your team and having that pride is something that can't be replicated.
For sure. And I think the other piece of that is the, I don't want to call it snake oil, but the way in which this is packaged and sold is 3% of high school athletes go on to play college sports across, like, just on average, right? And so with the transfer portal, that's shrinking. Yeah, you can go play all this club stuff with this pipe dream of being part of that 3% at what cost versus no, I can go represent my school and I can
Mhm.
do it in multiple times throughout the year in multiple disciplines. And what's going to be the thing 20 years from now that you remember? And how do we talk that life? How do we speak that life into these kids and these families rather than what the people that are getting a check are telling them?
Our schools, I think, are unique where the majority of our students that matriculate to university are going to high academic, Division III, and even Division I. They're looking at Ivies, they're looking at academic schools first. And we've actively tried to build those relationships with those schools, especially with this portal, because the trickle down effect on kids transferring and numbers of rosters and all that, we've been aware of how that's going to affect our students that normally would have the opportunity to go on to university, but what can we look at differently so that they can still go on? Now, fortunately, again, academics are a big part of where our kids want to go on to play college athletics. And athletics is definitely a tool to help to get them there. But again, the teammates, the relationships that they have in high school, we started a series at the school. We've looked at what our alumni athletes have been doing after they've played college athletics. And the things that they're learning in high school and in college it's second to none when you talk about thinking on your feet during games and making decisions and performing under pressure. And we talk to our kids about that and how that's going to be a long-term asset for them. Where, yeah, it might be tough to take these two free throws. That might be the game-winning shot, right? But after the game, you're going to be okay. What happens when someone has to have a difficult conversation with you? So we look at those things, we promote those with our kids so that they can see the benefits of what athletics does for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what in education-based athletics we constantly preach, right? This is what you are being taught. My talk track is athletics is a vehicle to teach leadership and followership and how to be part of something bigger than yourself. And
Mhm.
outside of that, you can get into the minutia and the nuance of each sport, but really at its core, that's what we're trying to teach these kids. And I think there's not really a better vehicle to do that. And I think that's where it separates itself from somewhat of a transactional experience you have in the club world because everybody's getting something out of it.
One thing, and it doesn't sound good initially, but the opportunity to fail is important.
Oh, big
I
time.
think if you're a baseball player, you hit the ball, you're batting 300. 7 times out of 10, you're missing it. But you get back up there, you're going to hit again. You're shooting 60% from the free throw line, right? Every time you're up there, it's an opportunity to grow from a challenge, from failure. And our athletes that you know that drive through that and get over those little hiccups. I feel that they do better when they, you know what, I didn't do great on this exam. Let me get ready for the next thing. It's a big thing that's lost, I think, a lot of times in what we do.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something recently is our best player got hurt 2 weeks ago and we had to play without her. And we've put together two really good games. We didn't win, but I
Mhm.
would say we were as good as we've been all year trying to figure out how to fill that void while my three starters that are over on the bench hurt are now having to put on a different hat and be elite leaders without being able to be on the court, right?
Mhm.
Now they learn what that feels like to support their teammates from a different role. And it's not something that you really get the opportunity to plan for anywhere else. Like we didn't plan for that, right? We got a concussion, we got a knee, we got an
Yep.
ankle, and they all came in different spaces. But again, you go into your test, nobody's really tying one hand behind your back and saying, good luck, go get it. You go into your business world and maybe you have some catastrophic thing that happens in the markets or with employment that you got to figure out. But the variance of adversity that you face in athletics, especially in team sports, can be all encompassing and things you can't even plan for, which I think is also beneficial for us as adults and for the students.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I'd agree. There's a lot of benefits, and a lot of them are unpredictable, and it changes from team to team, but from sport to sport, but from year to year. So,
For sure. Okay, let me pivot to this. So you take over as the AD, you're a head coach in a sport, you're an assistant coach in a sport. You have this, your own personal kind of cross-pollination from different disciplines. How have you been able to encourage that amongst your coaching staff, encourage that amongst your athletes? A lot of times as coaches, we get tunnel vision and everything is about, let's say, water polo or it's about tennis. And we forget that, hey, I can go watch the soccer team right now and probably get a whole lot of coaching development, even though I don't have another tennis coach to watch. Can you
mhm.
give me a few examples over the years where you've been able to either personally steal from something that wasn't your primary discipline and or encourage and see your coaches do the same thing?
Yeah, I would say one thing that I look for is, and I think this, I think if you're a good teacher, if you're a good coach, it translates from one thing to another. If I see a good coach that is, let's say, cross country, we have an incredible cross country. I mean, they're amazing. They're able to calculate the lap times and the split times, and I'm like trying to do the simple math and the benefits of the students seeing their growth over 1 year, but over 4 years, or in our case, sometimes over 7 years, is unreal. So the connection that they have is, I'm in awe sometimes. And I think that our cross country coach or any of our good coaches, they could go and teach any discipline. Now they have to know it, but it's about class management. It's about managing the students, but it's about the relationship that they have. And so I'm there's times in independent schools that we have to be creative in our coaching finds. We practice at 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's not always easy to find someone at 2:30 in the afternoon. If someone's available at 2:30 in the afternoon, that's probably not a good reason that they want to coach at 2:30 in the afternoon. And so I'm looking at coaches that I see can manage a practice, that have no problem stepping back and being the assistant coach, because there'll be times when you know what, hey, last year we needed an assistant softball coach, And we were striking out on everybody that we were looking up. And I finally went to our swim coach and I was like, look, I see your diligence. I see how well that you have developed these relationships with the kids. You're holding them accountable. They respect you. You have any interest in doing softball? He said, I've never done softball. He said, I don't know softball at all. I said, you'd be the assistant softball coach, right? We'll have a head softball coach for middle school. You're the assistant. I want you to, if it's buses, if it's accountability, if it's anything like that, they'll get the X's and O's, but I need you to be working on those other things as you're learning it. And he's like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And 2 hours later, he's like, hey, I just got my certification to be an NFHS softball coach. Can you reimburse me for this certification? I'm like, yes, in a second. How quickly can I get you your money back? Those are the kinds of coaches that we want and that we need because again, they just as our students transfer from one sport to another, our coaches do that, and that's how we attract more kids. Oh, this coach is doing that sport. I'm going to try it. Or they may say, hey, why don't you try this sport? Try this activity, try something out. And the kids have developed that trust with that coach. All of a sudden, those programs become stronger just from numbers.
For sure. What is something, right? You were at your other school, you came here. I generally want to know what's something that you do in your program that has the largest ripple effect on the culture you're trying to create. And as the AD, you get to see all the
Mhm.
programs, right? And so you may have your own thing that you do that you brought with you from Audi International that you still do here, but I'm really looking for tangible things to offer to audience. So are there a
Mhm.
couple things maybe you can share that you do or your coaches do that's, hey, this is big. And it's not the amorphous culture, but it's actually a tactile, they do this and it
Mhm.
impacts their team in this way. So maybe people can steal some ideas and some thoughts.
So the first thing, and I don't know if it evolved my first year, no, my second year here when I was at Cooper, and you're seeing it more, and I think it's a little bit more common. But 9 years ago, we started making a push to have the best social media presence. And I know it's an easy thing, but we seriously looked at it and we're like, we want to have the best social media high school promotion in the country. And I know it sounds aspirational, but we saw it as a way that we could promote what we're doing. We could tell our story. We could get more traction from people outside when they're like, oh, let me see what's going on with John Cooper. If they don't even know, and then they can see the things that we're doing and the inclusion, especially as a smaller independent school. And we've carried that on and tried different things. I think it's common now, but there's a expectation and a standard within our athletic department that we continue to promote and use that as a benefit to us. The other thing, and again, I don't know if this didn't really transition from Audi to Cooper, but just because it's technological, but the communication piece in the last 5 years, last 3 years has accelerated to another speed. What the parents expect, what we need to provide, and that's something that we do a pretty good job, but we still need to always do better. You can't over communicate, you can't get them enough information. And like the speed of what things happen today, missing something, it's amplified so much. So that's something that we preach in our weekly meeting, in the weekly message that our programs send out, that is to try to get that out there and then as consistent as possible so there's no confusion.
Talk to me a little bit more about that and what your standards is not the right word, but I'm going to use it, is at the middle school versus the high school. For example, at the high school, we are real big on communicating directly with the athletes and teaching them the expectation is they're letting their parents know what's going on, right? We publish the game schedules, but we
Mhm.
don't always send like the practice updates to the parents. It's like the kids are responsible for that. The middle school, we do it. We try to wean them out of that by the time they're coming to the high school. But I'd love your take on that in regards to you can never communicate enough because we've had a
Mhm.
few fumbles this year. And I'm
Mhm.
curious how you guys do that and the why and what you've shifted over the years as you've got your teeth more and more into this.
I think ideally having the students be the point person for communication is great. But in practice, that's where misinterpretation happens sometimes, or a lot of times. And so, although we send our communication to parents and students, so they get it, so everybody's on the same page. We've created every Thursday, our coaches that are in season, Thursday, 4 o'clock, it's going out, and that's program wide. I don't send it because our program heads, they have all the specific information. And to do that for the whole department, it just wouldn't be a good use of time. But our middle school, our upper school, there's two different messages that go out, but I say this lightly, we almost over communicate at times, but it's still not enough. We have stuff posted, the games, the results in multiple places. We promote it through social media. We do a recap of games and a preview for those families. So we get the information out there as much as possible because a lot of time the students are at the mercy of what their parents' schedules are, especially if they're freshmen and sophomores. They're not driving yet. Middle school, obviously, they always are. But in the changing world that we have, I know when I was in high school, you got a schedule at the beginning of the year and nothing changed. It could be 30, it could literally be 30 below zero, and we were not changing a basketball game. They just stayed in stone, in slate there. But things change a lot more now. We know more about weather, so that might be something. There's independent schools. Again, we want our students to be able to try the play and drama and band. And sometimes those get moved and then they're in conflict. So we have to negotiate with the other schools. Hey, we're supposed to play at 7 o'clock for this middle school game. Can we play at 5 o'clock? Because now we can get done and now our kids can make it to both things. So I think having that information out there to our parents, to our kids, then actually also to our faculty and staff, so they have that the wherewithal for changes is important.
As the president of the Southwest Preparatory Schools Conference, whatever
Conference,
that
yep.
is, I already forget what
Yep.
it is, but you know
Yep.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you are collaborating on there that have found it back to your site? So I just told you we started late because I was driving back from San Jose, where I was at a CCS Athletic Director Association meeting where we were sharing out best practices and things like that, in addition to doing some practical stuff about the state conference and classes and all of that. But what are some of the things that you have been able to benefit from both individually and as a school site by being part of the greater organization of athletics?
The biggest thing is the 18 different schools that are in our league are all like-minded. So they have the same challenges, they have the same successes and highlights that we do. Academic standards are pretty much similar. Parental expectations from faculty and staff and coaches is very similar. And why that's a benefit is when we go to schools that are not in the SPC, the rules are altered some. We're playing all on the same field, and there's a mutual respect between us. And that's not to say that there's not heated rivalries and stuff like that, but we understand if we're going to go to play St. John's, there's going to be a certain level of professionalism that we expect and that they expect from us when we go to those schools. And it's a tight-knit group, but I think that benefits us because otherwise I think we would be the outliers compared to a lot of private schools and definitely to the public schools.
For sure. All right, let's pivot here. We got a couple more questions I'm going to throw at you.
Yep.
As we onboard more inexperienced head coaches, there's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way. Most of them aren't catastrophic, but they may feel that way to the coach. And so I'm in conversation with one of my first year head coaches who wrapped up and was just sharing how much they're still struggling, even though it ended 2 months ago. Feeling, am I right for this? The way it ended was such a challenge. And I'm sitting here going, listen, I have years of stories in which I've fallen on my face, and I'm 25 years into this, and I just did something last week. So there's nothing to worry about. It's more about how you internalize and how you learn from that, and how do we grow. So I'm curious that for our listeners and for our colleagues, it's like, what are some of the failures that you faced in your journey that have been transformational in regards to your growth, where you could have thrown in the towel, but it was actually a really good moment of, hey, let me dig into this and figure out how to be better. And I just feel like sometimes in our role, people think we have all the answers when we don't. We're still figuring it out. Yet the vulnerability of, hey, I've done what you've done. It's all
Mhm.
good. The world will continue. It's a great opportunity to learn. Do you have any stories you could share that might make people feel better about themselves?
Yeah, I will say this with the younger coaches. I'm a big fan of trying to find younger coaches because I also find, yeah, they might be green and inexperienced, but the younger ones that we've hired lately, they are, I think, less fearful to try some new things than some of us that are stuck in our ways. Oh, this is the way that it's always been done, which is like the excuse that I hate more than anything else. I want a coach that's thinking differently than the way that they were coached 20 years ago, 10 years ago, because we have data, we have information, we have analytics that back up decisions. If it's statistical, if it's training. So I'm always eager for younger coaches with the right type of energy. As far as failures, man, you're right. There's been a lot. One, one that sticks out to me is I remember I probably midway through my coaching career, and we went defeated. We did not win a game the whole season, and we were never an incredible state contending basketball team at that time, just because of the league that we were in. You schedule games on where you think your team is going to be. And those games that you're like, okay, these are ones that we should win. And just having some success is good for the kids. But I remember halfway through the season, I was like, okay, we lost these games that I thought we'd be competitive in. The conference game is coming up, and one of the teams had a kid that went straight to the NBA in our conference out of high school. We were in a tough conference, and I was trying to find moral victories. Let's win this. Let's win this. Let's try to win this 2 minute period, right? I don't want 4 minutes. I don't want 8 minutes. Let's try to win the two. Let's break even for 2 minutes. But that was a grueling time. I was midway in my coaching career, so I was still beating myself up. I was trying all these things. I had coaches, we have expectations, we're competitors. And luckily, they let me remain at the school coaching and teaching. And the next year, the team was pretty much back. We ended up winning like the first game of the next season. And I think it was like a buzzer beat or something like that. And the weight of the world off the kids' shoulders and the excitement that they had, obviously, I still remember that. But it's easy for us that have been in coaching and administration for a long time to step back and see more than the wins and the losses and the scores and point out some individual things that are great. But in the moment, coaches, they have tunnel vision. They have tunnel vision. And there are times that's great, but being able to, if it's talking with a younger coach to see those things goes a long way.
Yeah, I also think there's a certain level of reality that comes with experience and wisdom as well, right? We're all delusional and think that we can solve the world's problems and we're super optimistic. And sometimes you just have a flawed roster and you're
Yeah.
not willing to see that in the moment. And you look back and you're like, damn, we weren't very good. And yeah, maybe I could have done X, Y, and Z, but at the end of the day, you can't manufacture points when there's nobody that can put the ball in the hole in
Mhm.
regards to basketball. But yeah, I just think there's so many times where as a kid, you're fumbling through something you've never seen before. As a coach, it's like you've seen most of the people that are getting into high school coaching have some sort of background where they had success in the sport. And so, like, they're feeling good about it. And then you get into the moving dynamics of managing human beings, and it's a whole different deal. And I've talked about that at a high level where you went from being the assistant originally at Rice, right, as like the ops guy, where you weren't really coaching basketball, to where you get into an assistant with all these other sports and you're coaching. Then you become the head coach and you're actually not really coaching anymore. You're doing all the other stuff. And then you become the AD and it's like you're coaching again, but you're coaching adults to
Yeah.
see the same thing that you were trying to coach the kids to see. And it's this weird human beings are human beings, right? And at the end of the day, that's why that relationship piece is so important. But let's wrap with this. So this is the question that I've settled on that I think has always provided a good opportunity for reflection, especially in the modern era where I want to say we're almost penalized for trying to have a divergent viewpoint from the norm of whatever group we belong to. And so I'm always curious what people change their mind on intentionally. So, hey, I used to believe in this and now I don't. And I'm over here and here's why, because I intentionally challenged my belief system and I looked for dissenting voice and I studied it and I've put this to bed now. And within your coaching career, your family, just day-to-day life, what's something you've recently changed your mind on?
Something that I recently changed my mind on. Huh.
Recently can be, let's say, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last year.
I'm trying to think of something substantial for you too.
Start
Um,
small, and then you might walk your way into something substantial.
so, okay, so this may seem odd. and I'm a pretty healthy person, right? And my wife and I are trying this New Year's challenge, eating healthy and all that stuff. And you're pretty much vegetarian, almost vegan. And I used to think, man, there's no way. Why would I ever? I'm in Texas, I want a steak, I want a burger. And have actually thought about continuing this long term now, the health benefits and all that stuff. So that's a little bit different. That's not necessarily in the coaching realm.
No, but it's
Um,
not. But you
but
made a conscientious decision to row against the tide of what you traditionally do for a specific reason. And
yeah.
as a result of doing so, you're now reflecting on, hey, maybe this is a long-term solution. Okay, great example. What's something else bigger picture than that that ultimately doesn't even have to be substantial, but that's the perfect example of what we do as coaches, what we do as teachers, which is
Mhm.
challenge beliefs. And if you want to believe that, cool, just make sure you have the evidence for it rather than it being whimsical or I read this on social media.
I guess the other thing, and I don't know if this is going against the grain a little bit, and this is, I think, how I've been for a while, but it's popped up more and more lately because of, I think, somewhat of because of social media. And it's the way that I kind of approach and look at leadership. A lot of athletic directors look at the leadership specific to athletics. And they're attending the NIAA. I've gone a couple times, but my path I've charted a little bit differently. I look at leadership from outside of athletics and what can be brought into it a little bit more, and with an educational lens. I did the fellowship for aspiring heads, and I was the only athletic person in there. And it's a way to challenge myself to think differently. But what's going on in the other parts of education that translate to athletics? And what are some of these business leaders, universities, if it's the Harvard Business Review in Columbia, and what are they doing in education that translates to athletics or selfishly to myself so that I can be a better leader in my department? And some of the things are easy, some you got to really study and are challenging. So I wouldn't say that's a recent thing, but it's something that I've really noticed or really taken note of and pushed myself for a while.
I think it's good perspective. My one of my future teachers and mentors who runs a school and they're looking for new AD and the placement agency announcement came across and I sent it. I was like, "Hey, what are you looking for? Let me see if I can help you." And his response was along those lines. I'm looking for a leader. And I'd be open to them coming from outside the athletic space, which is not something we normally think about in regards to you getting your swim coach to help coach softball. It's why is this going to work? Relationships, leadership, organization. He'll figure out or she'll figure out the X's and O's.
Yeah.
It's how do they manage people? How do they engage and uplift others? And I think being willing to look outside of our own echo chambers is the entire point of that question. So I actually love that response and the way in which you frame that for the listeners. All right, coach. Anything we didn't touch on? Anything else you want to talk about? You want to ask before we get off the recording here?
Let me ask you a question. In the last year or so, do you have a book that you would recommend for me or someone else to read that may not be on our radar? That'd be like if it's read or listen to, either way. But why don't you drop a little knowledge for us?
Okay, so the best book that I've read in the last few years in regards to just perspective is called Thinking in Bets. It's written by Annie Duke, professional poker player, one of a handful of females that achieved like the top level success. And the premise, which I think is the most powerful thing, and I had this conversation with my boys' basketball coach the other day. I asked him a question. I said, "Hey, why did you do that on this possession?" He said it was a bad decision. I said, "Okay, pause. Was it a bad decision or did you get a bad result?" And ultimately, her entire book is on this idea of looking at your decisions versus looking at your results. And as a poker player, all of your decisions in theory are based on math, right? This is what the math
Yeah.
says.
Yeah.
This is the decision that I'm making. And sometimes you get a bad beat. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean the decision was wrong. And so I think what I took away from that book, and I've recommended it to a ton of people, is that the we tend to result. That's what she calls it, resulting. And if you ask any of your people, hey, what's the best decision you made in the last year? They'll tell you, and you'll ask why, and probably because it had a good result. What's the worst decision you made? They'll tell you why, and it's probably because it had a bad result. But often that worst decision actually has nothing to do with the result. It was a good decision, it just ended up bad. So, like, how do we think about decision making in analyzing data and looking at the why and then pushing your chips in, right? No pun intended, based on that data. And the result is detached from the decision making, right? And I think from a standpoint of like just taking a beat and going, huh, I never thought of it that way. Great book. And then the other thing that I'll share and I'll laugh at is we had a 4-day power outage at Christmas this year. Where I live, the storms come, the trees fall down, they knock the power lines down. And often, because of the access of social media, digital news, all the stuff, right? We forget sometimes to sit down and read a book. And so I actually finished a book and read a new book during that 4 days that I hadn't picked up in a while. And I actually read this book by Oz Perlman. He's a mentalist. And it was talking about just his journey. And it was really interesting to be reminded how much information is there in every exchange if you're looking beyond the surface level, right? So the whole point of these mentalist dudes is they're like reading the room, right? And they're looking at you and getting their responses, and they're crafting everything based on that. They've set up some of their tricks and whatnot, but a lot of it is actually like walking you into what they need you to do. And so it was really interesting as well to see from that perspective how, I would say, like, manipulation happens, but just how much information is there if you pay attention. So I'm trying to apply that as well. But those are my one book I recommend to everyone is Thinking in Bets. And then that's one that I just read recently as well.
Fascinating. And they sound really interesting.
Yeah, and I'll give you one more that I think is worth reading at some point. It's called Never Split the Difference. And it's written by a old like FBI negotiator. Last name is Voss. It's a really good read, and it basically just talks about like how you negotiate your way in or out of situations, which was fascinating as well. I wish there was a way to like just program it into your day to day because my life would be a whole lot easier, but it was one of these things where that one stuck with me as well. Anyhow, good talk, John. If you ever get out here to God's country, let me know. I get to Texas once every few years, but I haven't been to Houston since I was there for this Teaching the World's Religions conference in like 2016. I had to get back there at some point.
I do have some friends in San Francisco and San Jose and Sonoma.
There you go.
So I know the area fairly well. So I do try to get out there at least once a year, but I'd love to stop by, check out what's going on at your school there, chop it up a little more, man.
Yeah, open invitation, man. Hopefully we'll see you here soon.
All right.